Hi, and welcome to the next of our webinars. And today we'll be talking about how to deal with the pressures and demands of a small business leader. Today I'm joined by Rachel Alexander, who will be taking you through today's session. So today the session is funded by the Humber Business Growth Hub as part of the Grow My SME program. That's a series of workshops which help small businesses going forward. So do have a look at what other workshops are available and get yourself booked onto any which you feel is relevant. We do encourage as many questions as possible today, and we do have time built into the session to go through any questions. So please do put any questions in the questions function of your dashboard today, as and when they come up, and we'll make sure that we cover those towards the end of today's session. So without further ado, I'll pass you on to Rachel, who will take you through today's session. Rachel.
Thanks, Peter. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Rachel Alexander. I'm a workplace mental health psychologist, and I'm so delighted today to be taking you through this webinar. It's a new webinar that we're actually offering, and it's very relevant to a lot of what's going on at the moment. Clearly, there's a lot of pressures, extra pressures and extra demands on us as business owners or leaders. I'm a business owner myself, so trying to deal with what's going on as well as maintaining the business can give some extra pressures and demands. So today I'm going to take you through how do we manage those pressures and demands. My website is rachel-alexander.com, so if you would need anything after the webinar, then please feel free to reach out to me. There are some funded sessions available, so through the Grow My SME, so if you do want to take advantage of extra support from myself, then please contact Humber Business Growth Hub and they will tell you all about it. So today we're going to be talking for 2 hours. Well, we're meeting for 2 hours. However, I will finish the presentation about 10 minutes before we're due to finish, so about 10 to 4. So if you have got any questions, then please just bang them in the dashboard and Peter will facilitate those questions later on. We will have a quick break in about an hour because I think it can get a little bit intense just listening to an online call like this. So we will have a quick break, about a 5-minute break halfway through, just to be able to, just give our brains a little bit of a rest. So any questions that you have going along, please just put them in the dashboard as we're going along, because you may forget them later on at the end of the presentation. So let's have a look at what we're going to be talking about today. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to recognise the importance of managing the pressures and demands that are placed upon you. And so that's what the beginning of this webinar is going to be, to try and help you to understand why it's so important to be able to manage pressure and demands. So from a physical point of view, from a stress point of view, why is it important that we manage such pressures? I'm also going to be talking about how to reduce the risk of burnout, which can occur from managing pressures and demands. And burnout is not a subject that's talked about often enough, I feel. It's very different to stress. And I'm going to talk about the difference between stress and burnout. And finally, towards the end of the webinar, I've got a 6-point plan that will help you identify the steps you can take to reduce the pressures, therefore to get rid of the burnout. So there is a lot of information in this session. You can request copies of the slides afterwards, so you can go through it more at your own pace. And the work that I do is very much about being introspective and about self-reflecting. So this webinar might be slightly different to what you may be expecting, in that I'm going to be asking you to, if you like, go within and reflect on your life at the moment and reflect on what those pressures and demands are and what's causing those pressures and demands, which is often the way that we think. My background is more of consciousness psychology, which is all about just having the self-awareness to look at what am I thinking, what am I feeling, and therefore how does that affect my behaviour. So I hope you enjoy it. Any questions, as I say, please feel free. So let's dive in. Okay, so one of the first things I want you to take from this webinar, guys, is that you are your greatest asset. So we need to protect the asset. So many of you, if you're fortunate enough to have a car, would probably get your car serviced. And why do we get our car serviced? So that it operates in the optimum condition as possible, so that it's reliable, so that it doesn't break down, so that it does the job that it's meant to do for us. And we have to start looking at ourselves as a car. And we have to start, if you like, looking at how do we service ourselves? How do we make sure that we are prioritizing our own well-being so that enables us to meet the demands of our job or running a business? And that's so necessary for our mental health. And I will be touching on mental health. And, you know, when I tend to think, oh, I haven't got time to rest, I haven't got time to go to the gym, I haven't got time to, you know, take an afternoon off because I'm tired, what I have to remember is if there's no me, there's no business. And I want you guys to sort of like think the same. If there's no you, if you're a team leader, for example, and there's no you, then your team is going to suffer. Or if you're a chief exec, or if you're a manager, if there's no you, or if you're in a certain position where you're responsible for getting clients, for example, if there's no you, there's nothing to bring in. So you've really got to focus on making sure that you prioritize your own well-being. And some might say that's quite selfish, but actually I call it self-care, that we have to be able to put on the oxygen mask and be able to look after ourselves so that then we have enough oxygen flowing through us to metaphorically be able to help other people breathe by putting their oxygen masks on. So just have a little think about when was the last time I had self-care for myself? When was the last time I looked after myself? And it's about having the courage to be able to do that. So let's have a look at the diagram on the left-hand side of the page. And we have an image of a bucket there. And I want you to think that your life is like this bucket. And everything that's going on in your world, in your life, is filling up the bucket. So, for example, financial challenges will fill up some of your bucket. If there's any health issues with you or your family or anybody that you care for, then those will go in the bucket as well. Work pressures, work deadlines, conflicts, anything to do with family that is weighing down on you will go into your bucket, and your bucket represents your ability to be able to deal with these pressures and demands. And what can happen is when we're dealing with so much, in fact too much, the bucket starts to overflow and our body just says, I can't do this anymore. What you're expecting me to do is not achievable, is not possible. And that's when the stress can start. That's when the ill health can start. So a lot of people who come and see me for coaching, it can be that suddenly they've started to get anxiety or they've started to suffer with burnout. And what they'll just do is they'll try and find something that's just happened and put all the responsibility onto that something that's just happened, such as around with their partner, or they've failed a presentation at work or something like that. And that's not the case. What I have to do is, if you like, go back and I have to see everything that's happened that's made the body get to a point to say, I can't deal with all these responsibilities anymore. I can't deal with all this pressure, all these demands. I just don't have enough mental capacity up here to be able to deal with it all on my own. So you may not be in control of those things that are going into your bucket. Very rarely are we in control of what goes into our bucket, what affects us in our life. However, we are in control of how we respond to them. And that's what this webinar is going to be about today, guys. It's going to be about how do I deal with all the demands that are coming into my bucket. Because if we fail to manage these pressures and demands effectively, then not only can it cause us to become poorly, but it can cause us to lose our passion for our business and our work. And I know when I've done too much and I've not taken enough rest, I start to resent my work. And when I get to that point, I know that I need to take a step back and I need to do a little bit of analysis and look at what demands are coming in which I'm not responding to very well. So if you've been drawn to attend to this webinar today, then please trust that there's a reason why you've been drawn to it, and that there's going to be some information in here today that is going to enable you to manage those pressures and demands a little bit better than how you're managing them at the moment. So what are demands and pressures caused by? And because this is a generic webinar in that there's lots of different people from lots of different organisations attending, I'm not going to specifically talk about the different demands and pressures, such as if you're managing staff, if you've got sales targets, if you're having to manage a project, for example, or if there's financial pressures. I'm not really going to talk about the types of pressures, but I am going to give you ways to manage the different types of demands and pressures. So demands and pressures can be caused by lack of boundaries, and I'll talk about that more later on. They are caused by us not taking the time out to review the current situation. So what tends to happen is pressures will keep coming in from others, demands will keep coming in from others, until we take the time to say, I need to stop and assess all the different demands and pressures I've got coming in. Other people can cause demands and pressures. So for example, hierarchies above can just keep putting demands and pressures on us, and people below, staff below, can push demands and pressures up. So we have to stop and be aware of where are all these pressures and demands coming from. And I also talk about our home life a lot on my webinars, because of course they reflect what's going on. Whatever's happening in our home life can affect what's going on in our work life, and vice versa. Demands and pressures can be caused by what I call duty, loyalty, and traditions. So for example, let's take Christmas, a current tradition coming up, a very pressured and stressful time for a lot of people, because there's a lot of expectations of what's going to happen. You know, I'll come round to your house on Christmas Day, or you should do this on Christmas Day, or we all go for a meal, you know, the Saturday before Christmas Day or whatever. And actually, sometimes we don't want to do these things, but we just go along with it for that easy life, for that easy street. And therefore, we grow resentful because we're not doing actually what we want to do. So I'm going to be talking about all these things and unpacking them as we go through the webinar. Demands and pressures are caused by not wanting to upset people. So we tend to say yes when really we want to say no. And we do this because we have a fear of conflict with people. A lot of us also have a reluctance to ask for help. I include myself in that one, that it takes courage to ask for help because we don't want to be seen as weak or inadequate, yet actually we all need to be able to ask for help. And demands and pressures can be caused by keeping our life the same, because if we think about changing our life, then we have a fear of the consequences of doing that and the fear of the unknown. And so therefore we keep in sort of like this comfort zone that actually is not keeping us happy or motivating us. So there's lots of different reasons how demands and pressures are caused by. And at the end, I will give you a 6-point plan to be able to, you know, work with these so that you can release, you know, these pressures that are being caused on by others or work, etc. Okay, so why is it important to manage the pressures and demands? Well, because sadly they can lead to burnout. And as I say, we hear about stress all the time, but burnout is sort of like the kid on the block that nobody really talks about that much. And actually, I see more people struggling with burnout than I do with stress. So I thought it'd be nice to talk more about burnout in this webinar. So what is burnout? Well, it's a state of just being completely exhausted. And especially at what's going on at the moment with the COVID, is that a lot of people are in fear. And what fear does is it burns our energy quicker than being positive. So we just become exhausted. So we're trying to deal with this fearful thing for a lot of people whilst trying to maintain our current life. So burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. So burnout is stress is sort of like big brother, if you like, that is sort of like a bit more powerful, if you like, than stress. And it means that we're being pushed beyond our limits of endurance. So many of us have been raised just to keep going, keep going, keep going. And what burnout is a call by the universe, sort of like going, hey, hang on a minute, we need you to stop because you cannot live this life that you are currently living. So burnout is usually caused by excess pressures and demands caused by work, but all of life's experiences can add to feeling burnout. So we can have pressures caused by work, and then we can have pressures caused by home. And I'm going to be talking about the two in this webinar because it's important to realise where your pressures and demands are coming from. So what's the difference between stress and burnout? Well, we need stress. We need a healthy amount of stress. That's what sort of like makes us, get up in the morning and, get motivated. So we need short bursts of stress to empower us to achieve our goals. And when we're feeling that stress, what happens is we get a release of what's called adrenaline and cortisol. And these release within us to trigger, which I'm sure you've all heard about, the fight or flight or freeze response. So it's a response in us that says, do I need to get on and fight and deal with what's inside in front of me? Do I need to escape and get away from this? Or sometimes what happens is we just freeze and we don't do anything. Now, these things can cause stress, but once we take action, then the stress is reduced, the stress is removed. So we do need short bursts of stress. Now, stress is caused by the perceived demands being placed upon us in life versus our perceived ability to handle these demands. So if I give you an example that for myself, doing a webinar like this, because I've been doing them quite some time, the perceived demand is being able to do the webinar online, to facilitate the webinar. The perceived ability is, do I believe inside of me that I can handle and do these webinars effectively? And so because my past experience says, yeah, get good feedback, get some good questions, people are tending to understand them, then I've got quite a high sense of, yes, my ability to handle this demand is okay. Now, if I was in a role where maybe I had to come and cover your job, for example, I would be really stressed because my perceived ability to handle the demands that are being placed upon me, which is your job, would be quite low. So inside, that would create fear inside of me. And then that's the fear, which is the adrenaline and the cortisol. That's created by the adrenaline and the cortisol. So when we're in a situation where we think we can't handle what's going on, we're flooded with this adrenaline and cortisol. And I'll give you a personal example just so that it makes it real. About 3 years ago, my son, who was 12, couldn't go to school anymore because he was getting really severe sort of like panic and anxiety from the school environment. So I made the decision to deregister him. Now, at the time, the amount of stress I had was actually quite a lot because I worked for myself. How was I going to homeschool him? He'd been asking to be homeschooled for about a year, so I knew it was the right thing for him. And so I had quite a lot of stress because my ability to handle that demand of homeschooling my child was quite low. I didn't think I would be able to do it. Now, at the beginning of the process, I went to see a lady that had homeschooled her 3 children for the last 15 years. And she had no stress whatsoever because she knew that she could handle her homeschooling her children because she'd done it 3 times, age 5, 10 and 15. She'd done it 3 times. So what I want you to do is just at the moment, if you think you're stressed, is just have a little bit of an internal check-in and just think, okay, well, what are the demands that are being placed upon me compared to what's my ability to think that I can handle those demands? So for example, if you're being asked to do a presentation next week and you're feeling stressed about it, all it is your perceived ability to handle that situation. So if you can work on reassuring yourself that you can handle that situation, then the stress will reduce. And I'm going to give you some tips at the end of how else to manage stress. Now, burnout is slightly different. Burnout is when the stress feels never ending. So the adrenaline and cortisol keeps getting pumped out. So the stressful feeling is always there. So the last case of burnout that I had in a client, she'd been actually in a very stressful work situation for probably about 10 months. And so she'd been trying to manage this stress for 10 months, and then something had just happened, which was the final straw, and her body had just said, enough, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not letting you live at that level of stress that you've been living at, because it's not good for your body, it's making you poorly. So what happens is when you've been living with an extended period of stress, you can feel as though you can never recover from it because you've been living with it for so long. And this is when our immune system gets affected because we've got too much adrenaline and cortisol being pumped through our body. So let's have a look at some how burnout appears. So burnout does not appear suddenly. It is a buildup of pressures and demands being placed upon you. And so what happens with mental health is, if you can see this scale on here, is your mental health is affected by what's going on in your life. Now, there seems to be the reverse of there seems to be an idea out there that suddenly you just wake up with anxiety or you wake up with depression and that's it. Your body's just decided you've got anxiety and depression and you're going to have to go to the doctors and take some tablets to get rid of it. That's not actually the truth. The truth is, we have probably been in a situation that has been affecting us for some time. The pressures and demands have been affecting us some time, whether it's from home or it's from work, and we haven't had the correct reaction to how to deal with these pressures and demands. So when I was married, my marriage was not a particular positive marriage. It was mentally and emotionally abusive. And I got to a point of severe burnout because I hadn't been able to say to him no because of the abuse. So therefore, my mental health was severely affected by what I'd been accepting in my life. Once I learned to be able to deal with him and his reactions and get divorced, my mental health then became a lot better. So please be reassured that if you are struggling with anything, anxiety, depression, if you're taking antidepressant medication, it's probably what has been built up in your life to a certain point where you just thought, I can't deal with it. And because we're conditioned to go to the GP to take a tablet, that's what most of us are conditioned to do, that's where we think the solution lies, but it isn't. The solution lies in dealing with the demands and pressures in an effective way, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So our mental health can fluctuate on this scale. Sometimes my mental health is at good, sometimes it's at poor. When it's at poor, what I need to do is take a step back and say, what's causing me to be thinking like this, and what's going on in my life that's causing me to be thinking how I am, and more importantly, what can I do to change it? What can I do to change the stuff that's causing me to struggle with my mental health? So we talked about adrenaline and cortisol, and we need this adrenaline and cortisol in our bodies. But when we live in the fight or flight response for too long, that is managing the pressures and demands for too long, it exhausts the body. So cortisol is depleted and the adrenal gland is weakened. So there is something called adrenal exhaustion. And if you've got adrenal exhaustion, it's because you've been operating in a too highly stressful environment for too long. Mood disorders, insomnia, changes in blood circulation, poor digestion, immune system starts to fail, and your body will start shutting down. So this is why it's so important to take a step back and say, let me just look at the pressures and demands that are being placed upon me, both at home and at work, and let me see what I can do to try and minimize those pressures and demands. If you don't, you will get poorly. So symptoms of burnout, how to recognize burnout in self and others. So you might be physically affected by your breathing. You might feel that you can't breathe as well as you normally can. Might have something called a panic attack, which is very scary. You think that you're literally going to die. Your eyesight can get affected. problems getting to sleep, staying asleep or having nightmare, sexual problems, losing interest in sex or being able to enjoy sex, feeling tired all the time. And actually you may think, well, I'll have an early night, and you'll have an early night, but the next day you'll still be as tired. That's a symptom of burnout. No matter how much sleep you get, you do not manage to feel invigorated. Grinding your teeth, clenching your jaw, headaches, chest pains, high blood pressure, indigestion or heartburn, constipation or diarrhea, feeling sick, dizzy or fainting. Now, you don't have to have all of those. You wouldn't tick every single box on there. But if you've maybe got 3 or 4 on there, then, maybe have a think about how are these pressures and demands really affecting me? So that's how you might physically be affected. How you might feel: irritable, aggressive, impatient or wound up. Now I know that a lot of us can feel that anyway, but this is either more than usual, or it might be that you might not be that type of person. Like I'm not. I'm pretty upbeat, pretty positive, but when I feel myself getting irritable, I know that something's not quite right. You may feel overburdened, that you've just got too much to deal with and you don't know where to start. Anxious, nervous or afraid. Your thoughts may just race and you can't switch them off. Inability to enjoy yourself or relax or have fun. Just a form of sort of like depression, really, that you're uninterested in life, that, there's no joy, you've lost your sense of humour. You wake up in the morning and you have a sense of dread, or when you go to bed on the night, you're dreading what you've got the next day. You might just be worried about your health. You might just have some, bloatedness or just something that just doesn't feel quite right. And you might feel neglected or lonely, as though nobody understands what you're going through and that you're completely on your own. And because of these thoughts and how physically you're being affected, you might find it hard to make decisions about anything. You may avoid situations that are troubling you, snapping at people, biting your nails, picking at your skin, unable to concentrate, eating too much. Eating a lot of carbs is quite a sign that quite stressed, or just losing your appetite. Smoking or drinking alcohol more than usual. Feeling restless, like you just can't sit still, like your knee may you may tap your knee, or your foot maybe, if you're sitting watching telly, your foot just may be, moving all the time. And just a feeling of wanting to cry, or feeling upset, or just that, life's not much fun, really. So again, just have a think about, is there anything on there that I can relate to? And if some of you are maybe thinking, gosh, hell's bells, I think I'm burnt out, then what I would say is, I'm really sorry that you're having this realization now, but actually I'm really pleased that you're having this realization now, because it means you can do something to change what's happening in your life, which is the whole point of the webinar, really. So let's go on. So what is the benefit of burnout resulting from pressure? Now you might think, how can having burnout be a benefit? Well, actually, as I say to my clients, it's a sign that something needs to change about your life. So what's happening is the body is responding to what's going on for you in your life. And literally your body is saying, I can't live like this. I don't want to live like this. It's not happy. It's not a happy way to live. It's not a joyful way to live. So what we say is, when there's sign of discomfort, it's a sign of growth. It means that something needs to change in your life. Now, it might be that you've thought, gosh, my job's so stressful, I think I might look for another job. But then what happens is fear suddenly overwhelms you. And what happens is we get a voice in our head that says, well, I wouldn't be able to earn this amount of money. I wouldn't be able to get this pension. I wouldn't be able to get a job, especially in times like this. And so what happens is your fear outtalks you from doing something. So if we don't act on those intuitive thoughts and we let our fear outtalk us, but our life is still really stressful and pressurized, what happens is the body will say, okay, I'll make you listen. And every client I have that comes with burnout, I'll say to them, I think you're burnt out. I think there's too many pressures and demands. And they'll say to me, I know, I felt that for a while. So, we do know intuitively that the stress is too much, but we get so overwhelmed, we just don't know what to do about it. We don't know where to start reducing the feelings and the pressures and the demands. So how are we going to help with burnout? So let's look at recognizing if the demands and pressures have become too much. So you start to view your business's job as increasingly stressful and frustrating. So it could be that you've managed with your job absolutely fine, then all of a sudden you're just finding it very difficult to make decisions or, complete the tasks or be able to partake in meetings very well. So what you used to be able to do easily, sadly, you're now struggling with it. You may have grown cynical about your business or job and the people that you work with. You might have started to emotionally distance yourself at home and work. It's very common with burnout that it's like you just want to say to everybody, just leave me alone, and you just want to go insular. But that's actually the worst thing you can do. The right thing to do is reach out for help, which I'll talk about later. You begin to feel numb about your work, so you lose your passion. You think, what's the point? I'm not making a difference, or I can't do it anyway. So you really get a lot of self-doubt and you start to feel hopeless and in despair. You feel drained, unable to cope and exhausted. So you wake up in the morning, the slightest thing that you think, I've got to do this today, you just think, oh no, there's no way that I can do that today. Literally, you just want to pull the quilt over your head. You sleep, but tiredness is not revived by sleep, which I talked about earlier. And you just simply lack the energy to get your work done. And you're unable to think clearly. And so you get very confused. It's like living in a fog, really. You might walk towards the kettle to make a drink, and then 10 minutes later you might think, why did I go in the kitchen? Oh yeah, I was going to make myself a drink. It's literally your body has run out of energy. Literally, that's what burnout is. You may have reduced performance at work or home. You might feel negative about life, like we said, what's the point? Difficulty concentrating, lack creativity, question your competence. Start to have self-doubt, resulting in low confidence levels. Inability to handle stressful situations. So when we're faced with something pressurized, we just can't think what to do. We look to somebody else to make the decision for us. We try to avoid emotional situations, and we tend to shake or be nervous under pressure. So, when I get a lot of my clients, they'll sit in the chair and they'll shake because, the body is just packing up, basically. Decreased tolerance, so snappy, irritable, and it's more than a fed up. Much more than a fed up. It's like, I want to give up. What's the point? What's the point in being here? And physical symptoms start to appear, which is showing the weakened immune system because of the excess adrenaline and cortisol. Now, some of you might be listening to this sort of like saying, well, to be fair, I feel like that a lot of the time, which a lot of people do. However, what I would say is there will have been a time when you didn't feel all of these things that I've just been talking about. So try and cast your mind back to what changed. What was the point that it changed? And when things started to go downhill, that might have been the point that the universe was trying to say, okay, let's get you out of this situation because it's not good for you. But again, because of that fear, no, I've got to pay my mortgage, I've got all these responsibilities, I've got to have a job. We just keep in the situation, and thus these symptoms, these experiences start to heighten. So how do we start to manage the pressures and demands? Well, the first thing is to really take a step back and just have an awareness of the current situation. So what I do with my clients is I'll draw on the board a list of every pressure and demand that they've got. So I literally draw the bucket and I say, right, tell me what's in your bucket of life. And when the client can look back, after an hour and go, gosh, is there any wonder I'm feeling stressed? Is there any wonder I'm feeling burnt out? I didn't realize I was dealing with all of that situation. So what I want for you guys to do is just take a step back after this webinar and just literally list everything that you're dealing with, even if you have to draw a bucket on a piece of paper and sort of like, pretend that you're putting levels in this bucket. So you might put financial pressures, my child who's age 5 not sleeping pressure, you know, mother-in-law poorly pressure, whatever, and just literally list all the pressures and see if you get to the top of your bucket. And the second thing that we need to do is a requirement to change our current behavior and mindset. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is many people think that if somebody else changed, then their life would be better. So if I get a client that's being bullied by a boss, what he or she wants is that boss to change their behavior and stop bullying. Now, the challenge with bullies is it's very unlikely that they'll do that unless the person who's being bullied says, enough, I'm not having that type of behavior from you anymore. So we have to change our behavior and we have to change our mindset so that these pressures and demands start to go away. So there'll be some of you on this webinar that will start to do this. You will start to do the things that I'm going to suggest you do. Now, what will happen is wherever the pressures and demands are coming from, so say, for example, if you've got a team leader that is putting a lot of pressures and demands, and part of your new behavior is going to be, okay, I've assessed everything that you're asking me to do. There's no way that in one day I can actually complete all these tasks. So I need you to prioritize which one is more important for the business to be done first, for example. So that's a person changing the current behavior and mindset. But it's very unlikely that the other person is going to be, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no problem. They might be. I would hope they would. But often, because they're under pressure and they've got demands being placed upon them, it can be difficult for a happy medium to be reached. So not only do you have to change your current behavior and mindset, but you would need to be able to handle other people's reactions to you. And I'm going to talk about that as we go forward. So I want you to think of as human beings is that we're a bit like a car battery, and that we've got all these cells within us like a car battery has, and that our cells have to start each day with 100% energy in each cell. So I wake up in the morning and I want to be in the position where I'm motivated, I've got lots of energy, and I'm looking forward to the day ahead. So let's say that during the day we have 100 cells within us that need to be fueled with really good positive stuff so that we have lots of energy to be able to get through the day. Now, what happens is these cells of ours, what happens is certain things pluck the energy out of us. And so our energy is a bit like a fuel gauge. By the end of the day, the energy levels have gone down. So what can happen is, by the end of the day, we might just have 20 cells of energy left. And so that's when we can feel really tired and exhausted, and we reach for the starchy food, we reach for the beer or the wine to try and make us feel better. But of course, what happens is that then drains more of our energy because our body doesn't like those things. So it'll drain our energy. So therefore, when we wake up in the morning, it's unlikely that we're going to start with that 100 cells of energy, if you like. I'm just, using an example here. Obviously, we have more than 100 cells in our body. So what we've got to start thinking of is we've got to start thinking of ourselves as an energy system. So whatever we put in is fueling us, has to fuel us, and whatever we take out, we've got to manage that. We've got to manage what takes the energy out of our body. So let's just look at what burns up our energy. Because if we're burning up our energy, we're not able to deal with the demands and pressures that are being placed upon us, and our body gets very poorly, and that's when the immune system struggles. So overconsumption of sugar, refined carbs, and processed foods. So if we have an unhealthy diet, that's going to use our energy up more in our body, because our body is having to work harder to burn, to metabolize all this stuff that we're putting in our body. So if our body is having to burn up energy to deal with that, it's not able to deal with what it needs to deal with in life, such as the work tasks, such as relationships, such as joy, because it's too busy, our energy is too busy being used on the wrong things. So consuming alcohol, caffeine, fizzy drinks, including diet fizzy drinks and energy drinks. So, what we may think is, oh, if I have this Lucozade, it'll make me feel better. No, actually it won't, because the body is using up energy in having to process whatever is in the energy drinks. Excessive exercise and certain medications can burn up the energy. If we have deep emotions during the day, so if we have a lot of anger, guilt, fear, shame, depression, anxiety, panic, that uses up our energy as well. So we are unable to deal with the demands and pressures because our energy is being used up by us feeling all of these feelings. Prolonged emotional situations where resentment is being built is burning up our energy. So say, for example, you've had an argument with your, I don't know, brother-in-law 3 years ago, for example. If you still feel resentment when his name is mentioned, or you still feel angry, that is using up your energy, believe it or not. So you are wasting your energy getting consumed by that, rather than using your energy to go out on a nice bike ride, or to spend time with your loved one, or to sit and relax. Your energy is being used up not in a good way. And so chronic psychological stress, arguments, tensions, falling out. So say, for example, you work with a staff member who is quite argumentative, then that will use up your energy during the day. So it's about looking and saying, what is using up my energy and how can I change that? How can I change the situation so that my energy is not being used up in non-effective ways? So let's continue. Sleep disturbances can use up the energy. So, if you've just had a baby, or if there's illness in the family, that can use up your energy. Injury or surgery, if your body is healing and using, it's using energy to repair your body. So I've got a friend who's just gone through a divorce, literally in COVID, at the start of COVID. She said to her partner, I can't live like this. We're going to have to split up. And so for the 6 months, they literally have worked through, is he moving out? Is she moving out? What's happening? And he moved out at the end of October. And now she's absolutely exhausted. And I'm trying to say to her, yes, because you used all adrenaline and cortisol for 6 months fighting the situation. So your body now is having to heal, and it's having to rest to rebuild its energy reserves from what you've just been through for the last 6 months. Relationships which are aggressive, bullying and controlling can use up our energy. Pressures and challenges in the home and at work, obviously that's what we're talking about. And work pressures needing attention, such as deadlines, unrealistic expectations, staffing issues, for example. So you may be going, great, I've got all of those, Rach, and they're all taking up my energy, thanks. What we're going to do towards the end of the webinar is help you look at, okay, what can I do about each one? What needs my attention, and how can I remove the thing that is causing the demand, that is causing the pressure? And that's down to you. That's down to you doing something, which we'll talk about in the second half of the webinar. So I want you to think about, how do I refuel myself every day? So how can I get more rest? I bet 90% of you listening, if I said, well, put your phones down an hour before you go to bed, you'd get more rest. Because I don't know about you, I can at 10 o'clock think, oh, I'll just have a look on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And 11 o'clock, I'm still there, and I look back and I think, well, that was a wasted hour of my life that I'm not going to get back. So it's about making little changes like that. How can I get more rest? What changes in my diet do I need to make? How can I reduce the alcohol? How can you get out in fresh air more and take part in more exercise? And some of you might be sat listening to this thinking, yeah, I've heard all this stuff before. Yeah, the reason why I've heard it before is because it works, because science has proved all these things about reducing stress. Time is not an excuse. I can be the worst one to say, I haven't got time to, go out for a run or whatever. I've got to make the time, because if my physical body is in a good state, then my mental body is going to be in a good state. So I'm just going to before we have a break, just push you on a few thoughts here, because stress is internal, as we've talked about. What do I mean by that? Well, remember that stress is the perceived demands being placed upon us versus the perceived ability to handle those demands. So therefore, if I can make myself handle demands better and know that I can handle the demands better and have faith and confidence and trust in myself that I can handle the perceived demands, that I've got a high ability to handle the perceived demands, then I'm not going to get stressed, because stress is just fear. That's all stress is. It's just fear. Fear that I can't handle it. So to be able to reduce the stress, which is internal, if I've got to get to a point to say, I know I can handle whatever is being asked of me, that's where I need to be. So I just want you to ask yourself these following questions, maybe on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being absolutely, very much so, Rach. 0 being not at all. So how are you being a perfectionist? We can all struggle with perfectionism, where we think everything's got to be perfect. If we're scoring high on a number 10 on that, what we need to do is reduce our expectations to be a little bit more manageable, a little bit more realistic. There's no such thing as perfect. Perfect is a made-up word. It's a made-up word in the dictionary. In reality, there's no such thing as perfect. What you might think is perfect is different to what I would think as perfect. But just have a check-in of where are you expecting things to be perfect, or how are you being a perfectionist? So, oh, I'm just going to do this presentation again. I'm just going to, relook at these slides on the presentation again because I want it to be a bit better. It might be that we're just trying to be a perfectionist and there's no such thing. What percentage of the time do you have to be right? So are you at a number 10, or are you actually okay being wrong? How much are you trying to be in control? So if you're a business leader, how much are you trying to control everything in your business? How comfortable are you handing over control? What impossible standards are you setting for yourself and others? And how high are your expectations for yourself and others? So if we can start to reduce our expectations, have more realistic standards, let go of control, not have to be right all the time, what suddenly happens is our ability to handle situations, the demands and the pressures increases, because we're not using all our energy on having to be in control, having to be right, having things to be perfect, having everybody else to achieve these impossible standards. We're letting go a little bit. And so we're not getting as stressed, and therefore we have more energy to deal with other demands and pressures that are coming in. I was raised, my dad was very unable to say the word sorry if he was wrong. So much so that if we ever, found out that he had been wrong and he did literally have to say sorry, he would actually say "orry." He wouldn't actually say the word sorry. And that taught me, wow, I'm always going to make sure that I say sorry, because not be able to say sorry to somebody and take responsibility is not a place that I want to be. So, being able to let go of control over a situation, to not have to be right, to not have others behave in a way that you want them to behave, can release you from the stress. It's so amazing, this act of surrender. So where are you being a martyr, and what payoffs does it give you? And being a martyr is where you think you have to fix everybody, you have to solve every situation, you have to rescue every situation. Literally you're carrying the cross on your back all the time. And what payoffs does it give you, such as, does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel worthy? Does it make you feel that you have an identity? So again, look at, where can you stop being a martyr? Where are you taking on too much, and why do you do this? I once ran a workshop for a company in Hull, and I had a staff member saying that he hadn't had his holiday allowance that year. And I was like, wow, I think that's actually like illegal. I don't think you can do that. And he was like, no, my bosses are telling me to take holidays. It's just that I'm too busy and that I can't because of my work. And I was like, well, with all due respect, if you got run over tomorrow, your workplace would still carry on. They'd find somebody else to do your job. So that was somebody, being a martyr, taking on too much, because it was giving a sense of identity. It was giving a sense of, I'm important. And we're important enough just for the fact that we're here and that we breathe and that we make a difference to ourselves. So How much fear and anger do you have when things do not go your way? So again, can you stop being so fearful and angry if things don't go your way? Because then your stress will reduce, you're not using up as much energy, and you'll be able to have more energy to deal with the demands and pressures that are going to drive your business forward or drive your job forward. Where do you work at excessive speeds and not take a break? Where are you being oversensitive to criticism or oversensitive to looking foolish or feeling insecure? And again, a lot of us can take things so personally. And if we can just learn to assess the criticism of, is this good feedback? Is it going to help me be a better person? Or is it something that actually I don't share, agreement with? Well, I'll let it go then. I'll put it in the fuck it bucket, as I call it. It's not for me. Might be for you. It's not for me. So always be aware of, you don't have to take the criticism. Use it as good feedback if there is something that you need to change about yourself. But if not, let it go. Where do you need to say no to others more? And I'm going to be talking about that a lot more in the second half of the webinar. Where are you not caring for yourself? So where are you not taking rest? Where are you drinking too much, eating too much, not doing any exercise, doing too much exercise? Sometimes you just need to rest on the sofa. You need to have a duvet day, as I call it. Does your work still bring you meaning, passion, and purpose? If it isn't, what are you going to do about it? How are you neglecting connections in your life? And what I mean by that is, too often we can be focused on our job and we can be focused on our work, and actually we're not relating to the people in our life, such as our children or our partners or our parents or our friends. So it's about looking at, actually, where do I get my joy from? Well, I get joy from just hanging out with my 8-year-old on gaming for an hour on a Saturday morning. So how can I bring that more into my life? How are you being too nice or overly compliant? So we can all be too nice and we can all be overly compliant, and I'll explain why we do that later on in the webinar. So I know I'm asking you a lot of questions here, but you can get a copy of these questions. And even if over the next few weeks you start to look at these questions and be honest with yourself and have that self-awareness, will help you be able to reduce the stress in your life so that you can spend the right amount of energy on the right amount of demands and pressures that are being asked of you. So just before we break, let's have a look at how we would refuel ourselves to do with our home life. So, rest, change the diet, reduce the alcohol, and exercise more. It's as simple as that. Learn to stand up for yourself in relationships. So if you go home on a night and you're walking into eggshells because you've got an angry wife or a controlling husband or whatever, then look to do something about it, because walking on eggshells is no way to live. Stop giving your power to others. So, i.e., we can all give in for an easy life. Start to say no, because if we give in for an easy life, what happens is we build resentment. And remember, resentment burns up our energy a lot quicker than if we're living in joy or happiness. Stop putting others' needs before your own. Learn to meet your own needs. Stop trying to emotionally soothe others. Learn to handle their reactions. So what I did for a lot of years in an abusive relationship was I tried to keep my husband as calm as possible by doing what he said, because if I didn't, he then got angry. But that was because I didn't understand that I could handle his anger. So once I learned to handle his anger, then I didn't have to take responsibility to emotionally soothe him. So we can all be those emotional soothers. We can all have people in our life that just reach out to us, give us their drama. They might just text their drama to us, and we're there trying to help them. That's using up our energy. It's not using their energy up, it's using our energy up. So be able to take a step back and say, actually, I'm not in a good place to deal with this at the moment. I'm really sorry, wish you well. Let's touch base in a couple of days or whatever. And let's see if they come back and say, oh, can I help you? What can I do for you? Stop sacrificing your own happiness to make others happy. So it is a balance, of course. Pay attention to what brings you joy and make sure you do it. So if you love, going outside for a run, try and do it some more. Try and find the space to do it some more. Learn to enjoy solitude and explore what self-care means to you. So what does self-care? We'll look at that in the next part of the webinar. What is self-care? Ask yourself, if I demonstrated courage, the act of being brave, in all areas of my life, what would I see happening? So what would be different if I was brave in all areas of my life? Who do you need to have an honest conversation with to resolve conflicts? That's the only way conflicts get resolved, to be able to meet and have an honest conversation. Of course, if the other person is willing to meet to have that honest conversation. And finally, remember, you are not responsible for others. And I've put over the age of 18 there, but obviously that's, you know, it's not as soon as you turn 18, that's it, I'm not being responsible. What I mean by that is let others learn to take responsibility for themselves. So the best way that people learn is by taking responsibility. If we do everything for everybody, they're not going to learn for themselves. So it's a really nice balance that we've got to find of being, you know, encouraging, but letting people realize the consequences of their choices, of their decisions. So you fill up your car, how well do you fill yourself up with great fuel? So, you know, how well are you taking the time to think, what is feeding my soul? What is making me live in joy and happiness and peace? Yet what is draining my soul? What is taking away my positive energy? And how do I put a stop to that? Okay, so before we go into that, I'm just looking at the clock. It's just about 3 o'clock. Where's my iPhone? Let's have a look. Yeah, 3 minutes to. So how about we take a break, guys, and let's come back at say 3. So that's basically 8 minutes to bob the kettle on, have a toilet stop or whatever. And the second half of the webinar is much more about, okay, so how am I going to reduce the pressures and demands? I've explained why we need to do it and what can cause pressures and demands. The second half is going to be very practical. How do I reduce these pressures and demands? So yeah, let's come back at 3:05. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I think it's 3:05. So in the second half of the webinar, we're going to start to look at how do we reduce the pressures and demands. And it's not a complex process at all. The only thing it's going to take is time, just a time to just sit and have some space to be able to assess your current situation. So the first thing that I would ask you to do is to make a list of why you are feeling so overwhelmed at the moment. So literally you would just take a piece of paper and you would just literally either mind map it or just write it in a list or write it on your phone, whatever, and just put a list of all the demands and pressures that you're being faced with at the moment. And it doesn't just have to be task related, such as, under work, I need to answer my emails, I need to email X to explain why. It's not just task based. It's more about the responsibilities that you feel that you have, whether that be in the role of whatever your role is at work, or whether it's the role of what you play at home, or whether it's the role of a son or a daughter or a mother or a father. It's, all the responsibilities that you feel, really, as to why you're feeling so overwhelmed. The second thing I'd like you to do is once you've done the list, and it might take a couple of days, 2 or 3 days to do it, is just tell yourself that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Until somebody makes you stop and pause and go, how's your life at the moment? How's it working out for you? Very few of us actually do it. And so to have the acceptance to say, okay, this is my life, this is my reality, this is why I'm feeling overwhelmed, and to feel compassion for yourself at that point is an act of courage. Then ask yourself, what do I need right now? And instinctively an answer will come to you. Or you might get the answer, I don't know. So again, just think about it over the next couple of days. A really good question that the counselling world asks their clients is, if I had a magic wand and I could wave it, what would be different right now? Or if I had some magic tablets that when you woke up in the morning, everything was okay, what would have happened? And so it sort of like puts you in a space of what would okay look like? What would a positive reality look like? And so then if you know where you are now that's not working, and you know where you need to get to, then you know what you need right now. Yeah, you might need some time off to go and sort out X, Y, and Z. You might need to have an honest conversation with somebody to sort something out. So asking what do I need right now, and what do I need right now to get me to a solution, is a really good question to ask yourself. And to be able to gather objective support. So that means asking people what they think about the situation. But don't just ask people where they'll agree with you. Ask people who are willing to challenge you and hold a mirror up to you, who are willing to get you to maybe see it a little bit different. Say to somebody, what are you not telling me that I really need to hear right now? People that you trust, people that are supportive in your life. And you'll get some ideas from them. Well, actually, I think that your 15-year-old really takes advantage of your kind nature. Oh, okay, let me think about that. Let me see if that's true for me. Yeah, do you know what? You possibly could be right. This is what I'm going to do about it. Or, well, that staff member doesn't seem to be giving 100%. Maybe sounds as though you need to have a bit of a performance review conversation with them. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I do. So gather some objective support, and then make a list of action you need to take to reduce the feeling of overwhelm. And actually, this is the point where we tend to get a little bit fearful, because when we start to take action, our fear mind kicks off saying, oh, you don't want to do that, you don't know how it's going to work out. Or, oh, just as you are, actually, because you're managing how you are. But often we're not, because we're struggling with anxiety or depression or overwhelm, or we're using that bottle of wine or those beers to make life a little bit better. So just at least by making the action makes you feel more in control, makes you feel as though you've got a sense of, I'm going to sort this out, I can see a solution, rather than feeling helpless and overwhelmed and out of control. Then ask yourself, okay, let's divide it. What are the big changes needed? So, I explore with my clients, look, do you want to stay in the career that you're in, or is it time for a change? So we can talk about big changes. You know, do you need to end that relationship? It sounds as though it's giving you some heartache. So look at what are the big changes that are needed in your life to reduce the pressures and demands. But what are the little wins? So a little win might be going and having an honest conversation with your staff member and saying, right, this is where we need to, you know, to get your performance to, and I'm willing to help you. What can you do to, you know, help me help you, for example? And set yourself goals to change the core issues which are causing the burnout. So, you know, I got quite into a debate with somebody the other day about antidepressant medication. She worked in the pharmaceutical company, so her mindset is they're needed. My mindset is no, actually, sometimes they're not. Yes, sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not, because antidepressant medication doesn't get to the core issue, which is causing the person to feel a certain way. So try and look at what is the core issue that is causing you to have this pressure and demands, which is causing the burnout, and therefore set goals to change the core issues. So if you're working too many hours a week, what is it you need to change to stop working so many hours a week? Has it just become the expected norm in your industry that you work these hours? So is it a conversation with somebody at the top to say, I can't continue working these hours because it's affecting my life, it's affecting my mental health. So set yourself goals, mini goals, to change the core issues which are causing the burnout, so which are causing you to get the demands and pressures. So are you prone to burnout at work? If you're working long hours, not taking breaks, obviously prone to burnout. Of course, the more hours that you work, the more demands and pressures that you're probably going to get as well. Do you get home from work and work into the evening? The mind needs to rest. You know, when you're working on an evening, not only are you tired because your cells have burnt up a lot of energy during the day, but also you having to use more energy to work in the evening, so then you become more tired, and your body needs to have a rest from burning energy. That's why visualizations, meditations are so good, because you're resting your body, you're putting it into a complete state of rest. Do you set yourself unrealistic expectations and deadlines? Are you a perfectionist, which we've talked about before? Are you working in a high pressure environment with unmanageable workloads? Do you lack of control? Do you have a lack of control over the amount of work you're expected to achieve? Do you have a bullying culture, boss or peer? If you're a boss watching this and the answer is to yes to that, then you may want to have a review of that. Do you have negative relationships or poor communication with others, either at home or work? All of these things mean that more demands and more pressures are being put upon you, possibly resulting in burnout. Is there an unsupportive workplace culture or lack of management support? And if you're answering a yes to a lot of these questions, it might be that you get to a point to say, maybe this industry is not for me. Maybe this job is not for me. What would I love to do? What would give me joy? Are you in a high-risk role where you're seeing suffering, pain, emotional crisis, violence, hate, or abuse? So that's obviously a lot of the frontline workers, you know, police, ambulance, social workers, dare I say, teachers as well. And do you have demanding clients or customers? So if you've answered yes to these, then you need to be really looking at, okay, how do if I don't want to leave the job, if I don't want to leave the work, how can I actually reduce the pressures and demands? What do I need to do? And that was that last list that we just looked at. First of all, identifying why you feel so overwhelmed. Okay, are you prone to burnout at home? So do you have many responsibilities, children, aging parents? Do you get home from work and keep going at home with the home stuff? You know, I'm a single parent, so if I'd been out to work all day and then I was getting in and I had to do all the, you know, parenting, cooking, cleaning, you know, all that stuff, very hard to have downtime. So it's about trying to find a balance, asking for help, you know, giving yourself time off just to do whatever you want. Do you set yourself unrealistic expectations and deadlines around the home? Do you live in an argumentative household or have a lazy partner or kids? Sorry, just saying it as it is. Do you have a partner, children, or parents who demand a lot of you? Do they need that word no being spoken a little bit? Do you have bullying, controlling, aggressive children, parents or partner? So even as adult children, we can still have demanding parents that we have to set boundaries with. Do you have negative relationships or poor communication with another? Are you using alcohol, antidepressants to cope, or is the person you live with doing the same? Because that can be equally stressful. My husband sadly relied on alcohol and antidepressants, and it didn't lead to a very joyful household because he was struggling, he was in pain. Yet it wasn't my responsibility to fix him, nor is it your responsibility to fix that other person. It's about encouraging people to go and get help. And if they refuse to get help, then taking a step back and saying, so is this my life then? Living with somebody that is refusing to go and get help. That's the realization I came to. Are you in a high risk home? So are you suffering pain, emotional crisis, violence, hate or abuse? If you are, please email me. I can refer you to places, or email lots of supportive there's lots of supportive places out there that can help you. Do you have debts or financial pressure from others? As a full-time single parent, I play the role of a man and a wife, if you like, for want of a way of explaining it. And so I understand how sometimes the pressure of having to sort of like, play that male role, if you like, in the house of, bringing the money in, if you like. I mean, I'm being very stereotypical here, I know. But being able to have to take that financial pressure is really hard sometimes. And I see some of my friends who maybe work part-time and maybe the husband works full-time, putting financial demands onto the husband about, I want this, I want that, or, we need to spend money on this. And I do sometimes think, wow, it's like, little girl going to daddy to ask for the money, and how hard is that for the man to be able to, deal with that all the time. And it could be the other way around. I've had clients where the woman is the main, breadwinner, and the guy is sort of like at home, looking after the children or whatever. So I think what I'm trying to say is it's about just having that mindset of how can we work together as a team around the debt or the financial pressures, etc. Do you struggle to take time for yourself or feel guilty for taking time for yourself? If the answer to that is yes, then we need to work on looking at how do you get to a point where it's okay for you to feel that it's okay to take time for yourself. And are you struggling to get to sleep due to demands from the household? So again, if any of the answers to this are yes, it's a case of going in, doing a little bit of self-reflection, going back to that list and looking at what are the demands, what are the pressures, what am I not willing to accept anymore, and what goals or actions can I set to change the current status quo. Okay, so one of the greatest challenges in creating a joyful, peaceful and abundant life is taking responsibility for what you do and how you do it. And as long as you can blame someone else or be angry with someone else or point the finger at somewhere else, you are not taking responsibility for your life. And this is, if there's one thing set to trigger me, it's when my son will not take responsibility for something. So, he's looking to me to sort something out, or he's blaming somebody else. So, if you can learn that this is your life, it's your happiness, it's your choices, you make the right choices that are good for you. It's not about being selfish or about being manipulative or controlling. It's about understanding that you have a duty to yourself to make sure that you are living a life that brings you joy, happiness, passion, meaning. So what needs to change to enable you to be able to make those choices? Because that's the one and only duty you have to yourself in this life. Okay, so now let's look at a 6-step plan to manage the pressures and demands that are being placed upon you. So burnout is reversible, but only if change happens. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm burnt out, I need a week away from work. But of course, what happens is you go back into that environment that had caused you the burnout in the first place. So this is about getting to the root of the energy drains, of what is draining your energy, either at work or at home. And I quite like that image that you've got sort of like, change is on the right-hand side, or you can continue with the current ways of living on the left-hand side down that path. So if you've signed on to this webinar because you're feeling pressures and demands, and you don't change your mindset or your behavior or your thoughts, then the same things are going to keep happening. The same demands, the same pressures are keep going to happen. But if you start to implement changes, either in the way that you think about the world or interact with the world, then that's when the joy and the happiness and the demands and the pressures will start to, the demands and the pressures will reduce, the joy and happiness will increase. So how do we do this? So step one, like I've said before, a bit of self-reflection. Get yourself a nice, journal or use your phone or whatever. Why am I feeling overwhelmed? What is overwhelming me? What is draining me? And be as blunt as you like. It might be the fact that you have to wash up every night or whatever. Once you've realized, actually, I'll get myself a dishwasher, that'll help. It could be just little wins that you can take. But until you do the self-reflection and until you take the time to do the self-reflection, nothing will change. So what could bring me joy? And what do I need right now in my life? So think about times when you used to have joy in your life. What used to be happening? And how can you bring that back into your life? What do I need right now? It might be, just an offload with a friend. It might be somebody coming to give you a hug. It might be having a conversation with your boss where you say, I just need you to know that I'm struggling or whatever. What has to change in my life? And I love that question because over the years I've asked people that question and they always can give me an answer. So I believe that we all know what has to change in our life. It's just having the courage to put it in action. Where do I feel as though I'm failing? So if we can look at where we think we are failing, then it may be a question of, okay, so am I setting myself too high standards? Am I expecting myself to be a perfectionist? Do I need to give myself some compassion because of what I'm facing? Or is it that I'm failing because I'm not actually in the right industry, or I'm not actually in the right job, or I haven't got the motivation? I remember once I got called from a university that I was studying with, and it was an online course, and the tutor said, oh, I'm just going to tell you that module that you submitted, you failed it. And I was like, don't be silly, I don't fail at anything. I'd never literally failed anything in my life. And he was like, well, you failed it this time, you need to do it again. And it was such a breakthrough moment for me because it was like, wow, I can fail at something. How cool's that? I took the perfectionist pressure off myself and just said, great, let's fail. Sometimes it's good to fail because you realize that you can survive and that you're still good enough. What feels incongruent with who I am? And what that means is, where are you doing something where it's not really resonating with you? So I once had a lady on a course and she worked in the accounts department of a local educational establishment. And when I asked her that question, she said that she loved being outside, outdoors, in nature. So I was like, so why are you working indoors 40 hours a week? And she said, well, I went into accountancy from university and I just sort of like stuck in it for 10 years. So it's like, well, you're not a tree. You can move. You haven't got roots, you can move. So sometimes we have to make really powerful decisions to change the status quo, to reduce the demands and pressures that have been placed upon us. And what feedback am I getting from my body and other people? Other people can give us great feedback if we're just willing to ask them the question. What do you think of the way that I'm living my life? What do you think about the job that I do? What do you think about how I am as a person? Remember, it's just their opinion, it's not the truth, but you might get some real nuggets of wisdom that you go, wow, I didn't see that in myself. Yeah, I'll do that. One of the greatest questions I like to ask my son is, how can I be a better mother? What am I doing wrong? And if he says, well, I want more Haribos with me pork chop, well, no, that ain't going to happen, is it? But if he says, well, sometimes when we shout quite a lot and it scares me, right, okay, thank you for that, I won't do that again. So, it's so good. How can I be a better boss? How can I be a better employee? How can I be a better leader? Ask for the feedback. You don't always have to agree with it, but it might just give you some brilliant pointers for going forward. So step one is take the time to self-reflect. Step two, talk to someone about how you are feeling, because the challenge that we've got is when we're in this place of overwhelm, anxiety, burnout, we tend to push people away. but that's the worst thing we can do, because we need to open up. We need to help somebody explore the world that we're living in. So talk to someone about how you are feeling. That might be something like coaching, which is what I do, or there's other great coaches out there in the area. There's fantastic charities that are about, Mind are a great charity that can offer you just a space to talk. It might be you want to talk to your boss, HR, or health, just somebody that is just a little bit out of your life experience that can just hold a mirror up and say, well, from what I'm seeing, or from what I'm hearing, or from what I'm getting from you, I think this. And it's just a really nice way to, think a little bit out of your current way of seeing. Union, NHS support, private therapists, such as a counsellor. You may have an employee assistance scheme. I have put local GP on there. Just be careful, because some GP will just say, oh, you sound a bit anxious. What about some medication? And that might not be the right thing for you. And a good old honest friend. Good old honest friend can work wonders and hold up a mirror for you. So please look that if you are struggling with the pressures and demands and you just feel so overwhelmed, you just don't know where to start to try reducing them, then please look to for further support. Plenty of people out there want to make a positive difference and help others. Okay, step 3, we've talked about it a little bit, but learn how to look after yourself. Many of us don't even know how to look after ourselves. So I've talked about these already. Nutritious food, manage your alcohol intake, reduce sugary food, drinks, coffee, etc. Remember, the reason why I'm saying that is because your body has to use a lot of energy burning it up, let alone the effect that it has on your mental state. So if you can reduce them, your body can then use the energy for what is really needed for managing demands and pressures. Big fan of the next one. Avoid negative news channels, especially with what's going on at the moment. When this COVID thing started, I watched the 5 o'clock briefing, I think, once, and I could literally feel my body going into fear from the amount of fear that was being pumped out of there. And I haven't watched the news since. I actually stopped watching the news probably about 20 years ago. So, you will survive not watching the news. Because the news is negative energy, it affects your cells in your body. It can affect it negatively. Think about what you're watching on the TV. If you're watching things with shouting on, with drama on, with horror in, for some people, it can use up a lot of energy because it triggers the adrenaline and the cortisol. So just be mindful of what you're watching. At the end of it, do you feel lifted up? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel joy? Did you really enjoy it? Or is there a sense of, that was a bit disappointing? I do not watch like series now, because the end one I'm usually disappointed, but I've had to watch the end one to get to a point to know what happens. So I'm very selective about the series that I watch. Fresh air, nature and exercise, especially sunshine. Make sure you're getting an adequate amount of sleep. If you're struggling to get to sleep, please use meditations, yoga, visualizations, which can all help you sleep. So, just sort of like Google some sleep meditations or, visualization for getting to sleep, and just play it and it'll help you get to sleep. Surround yourself with as much positivity as you can, YouTube channels, podcasts, books, etc. Most importantly, listen to your body. Is it asking you to rest and relax? What does this look like to you? Many of us are brought up that resting and relaxing is a waste of time, not really needed, but actually it is an effective, it is effective. Your body needs to literally just rest and relax. So if you find yourself struggling to rest and relax, then maybe have a look at that. What do you enjoy doing? So, could if I asked you a question, what are the top 3 things you enjoy doing? Could you tell me the answer to that? If not, maybe you need to start looking at that. How do you relax? If I asked you that question, what's your most effective way of relaxing? Could you answer me that question? And again, if I asked you, okay, name 3 things that bring you joy, could you answer me those questions? So this is all about learning to look after yourself. And finally, just reflect if your self-worth is wrapped up in your workplace success. So a lot of people get a lot of identity from the job that they do. And of course, the challenge with that is if the job goes, if we get made redundant or the job role changes, then we're like a skeleton. There's nothing that we feel good about ourselves because it's the workplace that has given us our identity, instead of knowing that we're a really good person and that we're very loving, we're very kind, we're very honourable. So just make sure that your self-worth is not wrapped up in the success in your workplace, because of course then if you have a bad week where you've not hit your targets, you're going to be down on yourself, which is not where you want to be. So step 3, learn how to look after yourself. Stacks of things on the internet about that. And please choose your environment carefully, which sits into the self-care. So what we've got here is we've got a list. This is just taken from one of my books. We've got a list of positive influences and negative influences. And then we've got a list of things on the left-hand side. So for example, there will be people in your life who are a positive influence. They make you feel good about yourself. They lift you up. They inspire you. They are an absolute joy to be around. You can't wait to be around them. But then there'll also be people that are negative influences around you, who drain you, who put fear in you, who make you doubt yourself, who make you feel frustrated. So again, be able to, if you like, do a little bit of an audit on people around you and think, right, who's positive influences in my life and who's negative influences in my life? And ask yourself, am I a positive influence to others, or am I a negative influence to others? What effect do I have on people? And do, again, a little bit of a self-reflection. You know, look at TV, films. I just like to really watch true stories because they inspire me. They make me want to be a better person. And I'll absolutely avoid soap operas because, you know, shouting, draining, drama, can't stand it. Music, I like to listen to songs with, you know, inspirational lyrics or songs that remind me of good times that I've had. And I avoid songs with, you know, depressing lyrics or, you know, I can't live without you or whatever. Then look at ways to spend your time. So are you spending your times in positive ways that uplift you, that make you feel good, that at the end of the day think, wow, that was a really good day? Or are you spending your time, you know, complaining to friends, moaning about COVID, you know, whatever? It's about self-reflecting and looking at yourself and the type of person that you are. And you might think, well, how does this help me manage demands and pressures? Well, because if you're surrounded by positivity, you have a lot more emotional resilience to be able to deal with those demands and pressures. Whereas if you're having negative influences, your energy will be low and you will be in a vibration of fear. So then anything that happens to you triggers that fear even more, and you feel that you can't handle the pressures and the demands. You know, and you always know a person we all probably know a person that says, oh, wait till I hear what I'll tell you what happened to me today. You're not going to believe what happened to me today. And they tell you and you think, it's nothing. What's that? That's nothing. What do you mean? So, you know, we've got to, if we've got people like that around us, it's going to make us, bring us down. And so we haven't got that energy to be able to deal with the other pressures and demands in our life. Just going to skip through that one. Okay, step 4, learn to say no. So this is the greatest tip, if you like, from probably the whole webinar, that if you're getting pressures and demands placed upon you that are overwhelming you, it's because we're not saying no enough. And the reason why we don't like to say no is because of fear of reprisal. What's going to happen if I say no? So what tends to happen is we just say yes. We just carry on saying yes. But inside, we may be simmering with resentment or frustration or anger. And remember what we said earlier, that uses up our energy. So if we can learn to say no a lot more, it reduces our chances of burnout, and it stops the amount of demands and pressures that we're getting placed upon us. And saying no to others is, I like to think, is saying yes to myself, because it's a message that I matter. Because what I've learned through my life is if I don't look after myself, nobody else is going to look after me. So I've got to look after myself. So saying no is a matter of self-care. Now, some people might think, oh, it's selfish to say no. Or, you know, it means that you don't care about anybody else. No, it doesn't. Because when I say no to people, what I'm saying is, when I say yes, It means that I will say yes because I want to say yes, not that I feel under pressure to say yes. So people now know about me is that when I say yes to a request, it means 100% that I want to do it, rather than 50% I feel as though I should do it. So just think about, how good am I at saying no to people? Now, you get some people that are really good at saying no to people and everything is just no. And we don't really want to be one of those people. We want to get a nice balance of, if this is going to put a demand and a pressure on me that is going to put me in poor mental health, I've got to say no. So what stops us from saying no? Again, this is taken from one of my books, and I've called them crumple buttons. So if I'm avoiding saying no to somebody, what it means is that I've got some, if you like, crumple buttons set up in me. And so if I say no, for example, if I'm not saying no, I have a fear of not being liked, or I have a fear of disapproval, or I have a fear of disappointing others. Whereas what I've got to do is get rid of these crumple buttons. I've got to get rid of these fears. So I've got to be okay not being liked. I've got to be okay disappointing others. I've got to be okay getting into conflict and confrontation. Yeah, I've got to be okay being seen as selfish. Because if I can be okay doing that, that means I can say no to people. And it means I can say yes to people when I want to. So, when I'm working with clients, I'm saying, oh, I think you might have a crumple button of disapproval. We need to get rid of that crumple button of disapproval, because if people know that we have a fear of disapproval, they can press our crumple buttons by saying, well, if you don't want to, well, if you loved me, you would. And straight away, we're being controlled by our fear of disapproval. So the aim of the game, if you like, is to be able to be okay with failure, feeling inadequate, handling embarrassment, being rejected. If we're okay having all those pressed and being okay with them, then we've got pretty good self-confidence. We've got pretty good self-belief, because we're not scared of conflict. We're not scared of being manipulated. We're not scared of being seen as selfish. So crumple buttons are really important, that it's highlighting the fears. So just have a think about something that you want to say no to, and then just think, what am I fearful of happening on here? And if you think it's being seen as selfish, then just reframe that in your own mind and say, no, actually, this is about self-care. I've got to look after myself, because I don't really see anybody else that's looking after my mental health. And that's your duty, to look after your own mental health. So being able to say no is a great one to stop the pressures and the demands. Okay, step 5, be able to have an honest conversation with somebody. And again, the reason why we don't is because of these crumple buttons. So I bet all of you listening, if I said to you, okay, who do you need to have an honest conversation with? And you would tell me somebody's name, because you know that you're avoiding having an honest conversation, then I would say, well, okay, what are you trying to avoid here? Oh, well, I'm trying to avoid conflict. I'm trying to avoid disapproval. I'm trying to avoid not being respected. But then what happens is the situation continues. So whatever's causing you the demands and the pressures will just continue. What a lot of people do is they might complain to their friend about somebody else's behaviour. So I used to do that a lot in the early days with my husband. I would complain to my friends about him. And then one day I thought, what's the point in complaining to them about it? They can't do anything about it. I need to have a conversation with him about his behaviour. But of course, then I had to face my fears, and I had to be okay with conflict and confrontation. I had to be okay with feeling out of control. I had to be okay with not being liked. So many of us don't have honest conversations because of these fears. But by having the conversation, we realise that these fears evaporate, because afterwards we go, wow, I had that conversation. Yes, it got a bit heated, but I handled it, and now actually it's sorted. Or it's made me realise that that person is unable to compromise, so therefore I don't really want to have them in my life. So you've got to be okay with getting rid of these fears. So who do you need to have an honest conversation with? And find the courage to be able to have that conversation. So if you from this webinar have realised that your demands and pressures are coming from somebody else, and you now need to have an honest conversation with them, then just, you know, be aware that yes, it is going to be scary, it is going to be fearful, but it's going to get you to a resolution, hopefully. Whereas doing nothing is not going to get you to a resolution. The demands and pressures are just going to keep happening. And step 6, when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to pressures and demands, is to be able to recognise what's called coercive control. Now, a lot of people think this just goes on in relationships, in the home life, but actually it doesn't. It also goes on in the workplace as well. And they're quite dangerous, those coercive control relationships, because they can make you, not only can they make you feel dominated and isolated and humiliated, but it limits your autonomy. So you feel quite powerless, you feel quite helpless. And, you know, staff can bully us as much as bosses can bully staff. So sometimes we can be bullied by, you know, people below us. And so it is important to be able to have an honest conversation. So coercive control relationships can limit your autonomy, limit your sense of well-being, limits the ability to succeed at work and enjoy home life. It can be criticism, humiliation and mocking, which reduces confidence and low self-esteem. How to recognise first signs of, you know, somebody rolling their eyes or huffing or puffing or, you know, tutting. You know, it doesn't always have to be words. And what coercive control relationships do is they make you doubt your ability, stability, reliability, work ethic, or integrity. So it's constantly putting that doubt in your mind. It's using up your energy. So then you feel that you can't handle other demands and pressures that are coming. And a good sign is if you walk on eggshells. If you walk on eggshells around somebody, it usually means that you're in a coercive control relationship and you need to do something about it. So, you know, either talk to someone independent about it or, you know, do some research on the internet. How do you get out of a coercive control relationship? Remember, they go on at work, they can go on with friends, they can go on with family, they can go on with parents, but it needs to be stopped because it'll be draining your energy, giving you stress, giving you burnout, and just literally affecting your sense of well-being. So you might think that's quite a strange thing to put in a presentation like this, but it does actually, science research shows that coercive controlling relationships do cause burnout, and it's because of the demands and pressures that are being put upon you from the person that is using the coercive control. So remember, if you're a boss listening to this or a leader, a company owner, sorry, you are an employee too. So who is there to support you? And, you know, do not put all the monkeys on your back. That comes from a book which I can't quite remember now. Sorry, it slipped. I think it's the 1 Minute Manager series. And the idea is that when somebody passes you a responsibility to deal with, it's like a monkey that they're passing to you on your back. So before you know it, you might have 5 or 6 monkeys on your back because somebody's passed you the responsibility that they don't want to deal with something, or that, you know, they can't do it, they don't know how to do it. Can you do it? See it as monkeys being put on your back. I think it's Ken Blanchard's 1 Minute Manager series, that one. And what I would say, guys, is make the changes before your body makes the change for you. So the fact that you've signed up for this webinar with the title Demands and Pressures, clearly you've got demands and pressures on you. So make the changes now before you get to a point where you become poorly. It's really scary when you see somebody with burnout. When I have clients that have got burnout, it's really scary. Not only scary for them, but scary for me in a sense that they can allow themselves to get to that point where they're just basically a quivering wreck, bless them. So make the change before your body makes the change for you. So we have come to the end of the webinar now before we do the questions. So I hope you agree that we've recognised the importance of managing the pressures and demands. That is about the physical effects that pressures and demands can have on you, also known as burnout. We've identified how to reduce the risk of burnout, which can occur from juggling excess pressure and demand. So that was the 6-point plan. That was about looking at my life, doing the list, what's making me feel overwhelmed, what are my quick wins, what are my big changes. And we've gained some awareness of the steps you can take to reduce the pressures being placed upon you. So that's things like looking at your home life, seeing what pressures being put upon you in the home life, having honest conversations with people at home, having honest conversations with people at work, asking yourself those insightful questions: what brings me joy, what makes me happy, am I resting enough? And remember the slide that said you can either change and go down the right-hand path, or you can create new ways of thinking and acting and behaving, which was the left-hand path. And see that, if you do have burnout, see it as a call from the universe that we're trying to give you a heads up here, that the way you're living your life is not giving you enough joy. So how can you increase that joy? So thank you for attending. I hope you found it interesting. I know we have covered a lot of information, so please get a copy of the slides. If you've got any questions, please email me. It's Rach, R-A-C-H, @rachel-alexander.com, or send a question via Humber Growth. But we have, what do we have? Yeah, we have about 14 minutes just to have any questions answered. So please ask anything at all about anything that we've covered in the webinar, or anything that that you want to ask about that we haven't covered. There's no such thing as a stupid question. We get some really good questions asked, which help everybody else listening. So please feel free to ask the questions. So I'll hand back over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. Yeah, if anybody does want to put any questions in, please do put them in now, and we'll go through any questions that people have got. Also, if you want a copy of the slides, that is in the handout section of today. You'll be able to download those in PDF format. So please do that before you leave today. So we've got a few questions that have come in. So I'm just going to go through those questions now. The first one: how do you handle other reactions rather than soothing their anger? Sorry, I can't read.
That's okay. Oh, that's a really good. I love the question answer, because we get some really good questions. So how do we soothe others' how do we deal with others' anger as opposed to soothing it? Just check that that's the right. I've heard it right. Is that right, Peter? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to become comfortable with the emotions that others display. So what tends to happen is if somebody's angry, it triggers our fear. So then what we want to do is we want to either attack back, or we want to run, or we want to hide, or we just sort of like freeze. So the idea is that we have the ability that if it's an anger where it's maybe uncontrollable, is that we have the ability to make sure that you can leave wherever the environment is. So this is about boundaries. This is about, first of all, setting a boundary with yourself in your mind that it is not acceptable. This is my boundary. You might want to use the same boundary, but this is my boundary. It is not acceptable for others to show anger which puts me into a scary state. So what I will do is I won't tolerate anger. So if somebody's getting angry, like my son can get very angry, as a 15-year-old can, and I will say to him, I'm not going to be in this room while you're that angry, so I'm going to remove myself and give you some time to calm down. Now I get that, a 15-year-old son might be very different to, I don't know, a partner or a boss or a staff member or whatever, but the key is it's not your job to soothe their anger, to sort out their emotion. It's not your job, not your responsibility. So what we need to do is be able to first of all get that in our head. It's not my job to deal with, to sort out you let them have their emotion, let them have their anger, but make it clear that you're not going to be in the environment where the anger is. So for example, if you've got a boss that is very, very shouty, I would be saying to them, I don't really like that anger being shown at me, so I'm going to leave the room now, and then when you've calmed down, can we continue this, or give me a shout when you've calmed down and we'll continue the conversation. I once had a boss in America, and he was very happy at shouting at me through the screen, and I had to say to him, Mark, if you continue to shout like that at me, I'm going to shut down this Zoom call. And he continued to shout. So I just literally shut the Zoom call down. And it took him a week to come back to me and say, I'm sorry, that was out of order, I shouldn't have done that. So it's very much about having strong boundaries with yourself, know what's acceptable to you, know what it isn't, know that you don't have to solve other people's anger, you don't have to get rid of it, that's up to them. But what's probably happened is we're probably in a dynamic where they get angry and then we soothe. So we're in this roundabout, we're on this roundabout. So it's being able to get yourself off that roundabout. It's not acceptable, I'm not putting up with it, and it's a strong boundary. Hope that helps.
Brilliant, thank you very much. The next question we've got is, could you recommend some positive TV films or music, books or websites?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. Okay, well, I'm a bit of a Netflix and Amazon Prime girl, so I will literally Google, search for true stories or true films, etc. So that's how and then of course what happens is once you watch one true film, for example, true story, then it says you may like, and then others sort of like pop up. Gosh, can't think of any of. Oh, I watched one the other night called Deep Waters. And that was on, I think, Netflix or Prime, I can't remember. And that was about the whole Teflon scandal that was making people in West Virginia really poorly. And one lawyer actually took 20 years and took on this huge chemical giant and actually won in 20 years. So, deep, I think I'm sure it's called Deep Water. But yeah, there's loads out there. Just put in Google top 100 inspirational films, for example. And positive music, I just tend to listen to, gosh, I'm going to show my age, stuff from sort of like the early 90s type thing, that when I was carefree and, no responsibilities and, I used to have a good time in life. So yeah, just sort of like loads of positive books. Good book I can recommend is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. That's an excellent book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. But yeah, just Google, Google's great for that, isn't it? Top 10 inspirational books, something like that. But whoever's asked that question, if you want to email me, I can give them a more in-depth list once I've tried to think of everything that I've ever watched.
There we go. The next question I've got is, how would you say no without upsetting someone?
That's a good question. Well, the fact is you probably are going to upset them, the fact that you are going to say no. So if you go into it with that realization, that's probably a lot easier. And I would probably say something like, my fear is if I say no, I'm going to upset you. So what you're doing is you're taking your fear and you're sort of like putting it out there and saying, this is what my fear is I'm going to upset you. And that's not my intention. That's not my intention. So that's one way of doing it. Another good way of doing it is saying, my perception of this situation is that I want to say no because I'm feeling a little bit burdened. What's your perception of this situation? Because remember, everything is just down to a perception of how we see it, which may be different to the other person. So, I'm going to have to say no on this occasion. Like I'll say to my son sometimes, Luke, on this occasion, it's going to be a no, and I'm going to tell you the reasons why it's no. You might not like that, and we might need to separate for 10 minutes or so while you process it, but this is why it's going to be a no. So I sort of like preempt it. But sometimes people do just get upset, and it's about that ability to then be able to compromise sometimes, or say, well, it's one of those things that we're just going to have to agree to disagree on. I was telling my son the other day about something that had happened, that I'd had a bit of a incident with my niece about the vaccine, because I don't want to take a vaccine and she does want to take a vaccine for COVID. And I was telling my 15-year-old son, and he said, why didn't you just agree to disagree? And I thought, yeah, because I'd got caught up in the emotion, she'd got caught up in the emotion, and there he was, the voice of reason, just going, why don't you just agree to disagree? Yeah, that's sensible, isn't it? Why didn't I do that? So, when we are caught up in the emotion, our logic does tend to go out the window sometimes. So it's just a learning curve.
Brilliant. The next one is, how can we work with somebody who we work with somebody who is suffering from burnout and is hard to cope with?
Yeah, that's a challenge, because they probably don't want to admit that they've got burnout, I would imagine. Gosh, let me just have a think on that. Well, I guess you could maybe get talking to them and say, oh, I intended this presentation about burnout. Oh, it was really interesting. Oh, look, here's some of the slides. Gosh, I think I might have a bit of it. What do you think? And sort of like gradually introduce the idea. What I find is if people are really defensive and angry, what that means is there's some fear inside of them. And what they actually need is they need more love. So again, when my son's been really angry, what I know is he needs more love because he's scared. And it goes against everything you want to do because you want to be angry back, but it's about being able to, look through eyes of compassion. So what I would say is maybe try and be like overly sort of like caring, and just sort of like says, is everything all right with you? Because I'm getting the sense that you're not in a good place, or some, I don't know the type of person they are, so I don't know if you could say that. But I would imagine it's being able to try and open up the conversation, give them the awareness that they might be suffering burnout, and then if they're not, maybe go and speak to somebody who's maybe in charge of them and just say, look, I'm really worried about X. I think she might have burnout. I did this presentation on burnout and there's a lot of the symptoms. Or even if it's somebody at home that you live with, it's like just leave the slide lying around, or encourage a conversation about it. Because the reason why we get burnout is we don't ask for help because we think it's weak. So it's about saying, I need help, I'm struggling.
Brilliant. Final question we've got coming at the moment is, how do you care less about stuff like sales figures collapsing when you have responsibilities and a passion for your business?
How do you care less about sales figures collapsing when you have a passion for the business? Yeah, okay. How do you care less about sales figures collapsing? That's a good question. I would say on that one that I can only ever answer a question in how I would deal with it, and I think if it was me, I would look at whose responsibility is this, and if it's my responsibility, is there anything I can possibly be doing to stop the sales figures collapsing? If there's nothing that I can be doing to stop the sales figures collapsing, and it's nothing to do with me, then I think it's one of those where both can be true. I can still have a passion for the business, but I can accept that the sales figures are collapsing if there's nothing that I can personally do to change the sales figures collapsing. Does that make sense, Peter?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think as you say, it's all about what you have control over, and taking responsibility. I think from my point of view is taking responsibility for what you can control, and certainly things like at the moment, I'm going to say COVID is something which you can't control. You can make certain changes, but you can't control it. And if you're passionate about the business, then you've got to remain keep that passion there, and that passion only will remain there if you do, I'm going to say, do care less about it and lose the stress about it. That's like my view. As soon as you get the stress, your passion goes and you can't react to the business. So
yeah, I totally agree. It's the circles, isn't it? It's the what can I control, and then the outer circle is what can't I control and what can I influence. So can I influence the sales figures? Yes, I can. Well, I'll do that. Can I control the sales figures? Yes, I can. So I'll do that. Can I control the sales figures? No, I can't. So that would be a case where it'd be like, I'd have to put it in the, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a good example of this actually, just really quickly. I know we're short on time. Is that I once worked in a company where they had to sell income protection for something, for the people on the telephones had to sell income protection, and they actually, this girl was getting really upset on the course because she didn't believe in this product of income protection. She really was like, we shouldn't be selling it, it's not right, and da 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 da. And I was like, look, this is out of your control because the powers above you want you to sell income protection. So either accept that and sell it, or say, no, I'm not going to sell it and I'm going to look for another job. It's that thing of what can I accept, what can I control, and if I can't, then I've got to, put it in the FC UK bucket. So if I can't control the sales figures, I've got to put it in the FC UK bucket. It's not my responsibility. I've got to let it go. But if I can have a positive effect, then I will do the action where I can, have a positive effect. So yeah, I think that's my probably best answer on that one.
Yeah, sounds good. I think that's all the questions we've got for today. So thank you very much for going through those. Certainly some, I'm going to say, some very interesting questions this time.
Really good question. I hate to say it, but I think they were some of the best questions we've ever had on one of these webinars.
I'll definitely go with that. That's
Yeah.
some quite interesting ones there. So as I say, thank you everybody for attending today's session. Do have a look at what other sessions are coming up. Have a look at the Grow My SME events page to see what other events are coming up. Also, do please contact the Humber Business Growth Hub, see what support's available. There is further support for businesses going forward. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much, Rachel, for such an interesting presentation. I've certainly learned a few things from today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching. And I will just say, if anybody does want any more help, then please rachel-alexander.com. And if they want this webinar for their own business, then please get in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.